Hey y'all, it's Ariel, founder and host of Tea Time with Nana podcast. My goal is to make you aware of what you have in your hand, release what's in your heart, and empower you to use your voice. Thank you for taking a listen.
So sometimes when you go through a season where you've never experienced before, it seems like it's not like past seasons. When you go through, hard times, those seasons are different. I am in a place in my life where this season is so unrecognizable to me. I don't know if I'm doing this right. I don't know if I'm moving in the right direction. But today I'm off work, and I had this these bouts of uneasiness and uncomfortableness that comes up, that hits me at, I won't say random times, but at different times. And I notice that I feel the most uncomfortable when I'm battling these thoughts in my mind that tells me that I'm not productive enough, that I'm not doing enough. And as a wife and as a mom, for most of us out there who are wives and mothers and also are working, this is something that we constantly are having to fight off. And for me, I've always been transparent about dealing with anxiety. And today it felt like that uneasiness started to rear its head again for me. And I'm talking to God because I feel like I'm not producing enough fruit. I'm not being present with my children. I'm not being present with myself. I'm not showing up the way that I know that I can show up, and I'm trying my hardest to do that. But I am literally in a season where I have no control, and I am painfully submitting to God in this season, in this process, where it seems like I'm gasping for air, but also going through so much warfare. And I know that God doesn't waste anything, that He is the master perfecter, even in our pain and our weaknesses. The other day, things started to make sense. And the scripture that he highlighted was 2 Corinthians 12. And I want to say that was verse 6 and down, probably 6 through 9. But the scripture that, I'm very familiar with, and I'm sure you are too, that God's grace, his grace is sufficient for you, and that his power is made perfect in our weaknesses. I always read that scripture, but it was like when I read it again, something shook in me, and it was like I literally begun to see this, have this aha moment of, oh my goodness, that's the season that I'm in, where God's power is literally being made perfect in my weaknesses right now. And for me, one of the things that God has really been dealing with me on is facing and unpacking my trauma and identity of how I view myself and how I show up in our relationship, how I show up in the world, and all these different dynamics. He's been tearing down these old thoughts and processes that I've believed. So there's been so much deconstruction that's been happening this year. And I've gotten to a point where when that uneasiness and uncomfortableness starts to come up, I have to face it, and I have to submit to God in that moment I cannot swallow it. I cannot stuff it down. And so literally, I am seeing God's power unfolding in my weaknesses. And this month, if you are in a space in your life where all you're seeing is weaknesses, all you're seeing is you're not doing enough, you're not being enough, you're not showing up enough, just know that God's power, he wants to reveal and he wants to display and he wants to show you how his power is being made perfect in your weaknesses. And as hard as this is, how will we really know God's power if we don't get to experience it when we're going through times in spaces of weakness? We really can't. I know we want these things, our lives to always be rainbows and sunshine. And at the heart of me, if you know me, I am a rainbow and sunshine type of girl. That is definitely the duality of me. But it also calls for, sometimes we have to go through seasons of weakness and exposure for God's power to be made perfect in us, to be made perfect around us, so that he can be glorified, and so that he can be glorified in our lives. And this is a hard road. It is a hard process to submit to. One of my favorite scriptures is, or stories, is the Jesus when he was in the Garden of Gethsemane. And I cling to that, to his experience, and I relate so heavily to it because literally he showed us how God's power was made perfect in his weakness. And God is so kind for that, for showing us that example in Jesus. So, in this season of deconstruction, I am focusing on not doing things perfectly, but authentically and honestly as they come. So if you are in a season where God is exposing you, he's exposing the heart and trauma, mind frames that you're thinking of, that you're going through, that you've been experiencing, and you've been trying to stuff down or shut down, and you can't shut those things down anymore. They're starting to spill over. They're starting to come out. You are in this season with me. You are in the season of God making his power perfect in your weakness. And for anybody who is afraid of that, and you've been asking God for confirmation, you've been asking God for some comfort, I just want to let you know, don't be afraid. Don't allow the fear of the exposure of that pain, of that trauma, of that heartache, of those mindsets and mentalities keep you from submitting to God in his power. Because a lot of times in our weaknesses, and we all have different ways of how we cope and we try to control our weaknesses, but in those moments of weakness, when we try to control it, we're trying to protect ourselves. We're trying to cover ourselves. We're trying to keep these things at bay from God because we're afraid that if he really got a hold of the things that we're trying to control, the weaknesses we're trying to control, then he's not going to be pleased with us. He's not going to be able to fix it, or we're going to be judged, or whatever it is your thing may be. Your fear may be, your reluctance may be that it may be too messy. It may be too much to unpack. It is not impossible for him to unpack these things, because he seeks to clean these things with you. That's why his power is being made perfect, because we get to experience in real time, just as real as the weaknesses are for us. He wants us to experience just how real his power is being exemplified in our lives. But if we try to control how we're being perceived, if we try to control how the weaknesses are shown, if we try to control all of these things, then it takes away from our testimony. It takes away from the depth of our relationship with God, and it takes away from the comfort and safety that he's really building with us. So don't be afraid to submit these things, to let go of your control. Even if you are afraid and terrified, give it to him anyway. And I guarantee you, you will see his power is being made perfect in your weakness. Whatever your weakness is, he has a plan for it. He has a plan for making it less intimidating than what you think it is right now, what you believe it is right now. And I thank God for that he's so kind to do this for me in my own life right now. And for you too. So I love y'all. And we'll talk again.